Thank you for joining us for another episode of the UNspecial podcast. I am joined today with Olivia Willis. Olivia works at New Beginnings Therapeutic Writing, and I'm super excited to have Olivia on because I've always been very interested in horse therapy and what that does for all sorts of disabilities and autism. And your mission is to enhance individuals' lives through equine assisted activities and therapies to help them discover their abilities and talents. And you guys work
Mhm.
with mental, physical, emotional, and behavior disabilities. And you've been with them since 2014. That's awesome.
Yes, I have.
And you are now the head instructor and facility director, past certified therapeutic writing instructor, and head
Yes.
instructor and director of operations.
Yeah, there's quite a lot there.
Did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered it.
All right, all right. Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for being on.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm just gonna jump into it. I'm curious to know what are your most memorable breakthroughs or moments you've had with the therapies?
Probably some of my most favorite things that I've seen, like as students progress, would be the individuals that come in that are scared, nervous, uncertain. I mean, because they come in and we have a 1,000-pound animal just waiting for them, that can be intimidating. I have one student in particular I think of when she first came in. Her entire first lesson, the only goal we accomplished, which we were very happy about it, was she sat on the horse and then she got down. And that was years ago. Now, when the same student comes in, she's ready to go. She's confident, she's excited, she knows her way around the barn. So it's instilled that confidence and excitement. That's one of my most favorite things to see. Another would be working with students that are nonverbal. When we're working with having them ask the horse verbally to walk to make the horse move, or if we need them to stop, we work on them pronouncing the word whoa. So hearing that from these nonverbal students, it might not be as clear as a walk or a whoa for me and you, but when they start attempting to say those words, when they're writing, that's very memorable. So
That's
a lot of
amazing.
those.
So what do the horses now my thoughts are going everywhere. What do the horses do when like the student or somebody is like wild? Are they just chill?
Yes, I mean, to bring a horse into the program, they are very special horses. They love what they do. They have very good demeanor about them. When we have a student that comes, horses are a lot like people. They're going to respond to different emotions, hyperness, someone being calm, those different energies. They're going to respond differently. So when a participant comes to us, we start with a writing evaluation, and what that does is that just helps us to get to know the student, get to know their strengths, maybe what they need to work on. And that'll help me kind of pair that student with the perfect horse. Because, I might have a few horses that high up energy, it's not their favorite. So, this horse here needs a more calm, collected student. So I'm going to pair, maybe a student that's just chill, that just goes with the flow. I'm going to pair him with that horse versus, a student that has ADHD and can be off the walls at any time.
Yeah. So it's kind of like
So
when they paired me up with the horse in 5th grade. They knew.
there you go. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so you're doing a lot of like behind the scenes assessing, making sure the
Mhm.
horse fits the person and so forth. And so tell me about the speech you helped develop. So not only are the horses huge for social emotional regulation,
Mhm.
but also the speech when you have nonverbal kids. How do you get them to say stuff?
A lot of it's just work and repetition, working with them. Most of our students, we do work strongly with volunteers. So we will have a lot of students will have what we call a sidewalker, and also a horse leader. So those are individuals that, as I'm the instructor, those individuals are assisting me and kind of working one on one with that student while I am as well. They're just kind of like my extra hands to help that student. And so A lot of it is just working with repetition, getting them, like I said, they might not say walk, but maybe they're going to get the "wha" out for us, and that's a start. That's where we're. And we also work closely with the parents and the caregivers and figure out what are they doing in other therapies, what are they doing at home that we can build on to help get, maybe those verbal cues moving. And, like I said, the verbal cue for a nonverbal student might not immediately be walk, but we're going to want that. Maybe we can get that "wha." Maybe we can get something coming from that. And especially when you put them on a horse, when they're stopped and we ask them, okay, we need to move, we need to say walk, they're going to really want to keep moving. They love to keep moving. They don't want to stand there for the entire lesson. So they're going to do, they're going to work on that with us and try to get that "wha" eventually and then that walk. So
That's so cool. And the horses pick up on it. Man, horses are crazy.
horses are very smart.
Yeah. That's amazing. What inspired you to start working with horses and people with disabilities?
Well, I've had a love for horses since a very young age. I think mom said when I was 5, I started wanting a horse. So I've always had that love for horses. Growing up, I showed American saddlebreds and was just involved with horses all growing up. And then when I graduated high school, I knew I wanted to work with horses and I wanted to work with it in helping people in a therapy side of things. But then I didn't know how to pursue that because it wasn't like you could go to college and get a degree in therapeutic horseback riding.
Yeah.
So at that time, I was like, well, I'll just go start college, get my basics. And like most college kids, I'll just figure it out as I go. Like, we'll get there eventually. And so I did end up getting an associate's degree. And then in 2014 is when I found New Beginnings Therapeutic Riding. I went out and visited with them and learned they were doing exactly what I wanted to do. Um, and that pretty much what I wanted to do, I could just work with them. You go through a certification process because we are a PATH accredited center. PATH is the Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship. And so, us being an accredited center, I was able to then go through us, do the different trainings, do the different certifications. And it's about a 1 to 2 year process of a pass fail certification. And what that certification does is it just helps you train, helps you make sure that you know what you're doing, that they know that you know what you're doing to keep the individuals safe, to keep the horses safe, to keep the volunteers safe. You're doing all of it safely, you're doing all of it effectively, and that you know your horsemanship skills. So I was able to work with New Beginnings and go through that certification process. And then I've been there ever since.
And now we're 11 years later.
Yeah, I know exactly. So I'm definitely blessed because as a young adult, I was able to really pursue my passion and my dream. And here I am, like you said, 11 years later, still being able to do that.
Yeah. So horse therapy, I mean, I've heard of it. I didn't grow up around horses or anything, so I'm not really in
Hmm.
that world. And through all my years teaching, I taught for 7 years. I don't think I heard of any students doing horse therapy.
Yeah.
But, I was in Southern California for most of that, and it's not super big here. I guess it is on the coast. But so it's a big, big deal. How long has New Beginnings been around?
New Beginnings has been a program for 28 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and we are only one of 4 PATH accredited centers in Kentucky.
Okay. Okay. And how many riders come through a week?
A week, we service over 100 individuals
Oh my God.
because not only do we work with our therapeutic riding students, which that ranges between 35 and 40 right now. But we also work with different groups. We'll work with homeschool groups, we'll work with school groups, and we also work with substance abuse groups. So what they do is they come in and they come in as a group. They don't do mounted activities. We'll do groundwork with them. And so they'll come in and they'll groom the horses. And then we work on a certain word that might be associated with their recovery, such as respect, trust, or something like that. And we correspond it to how working with the horse. Say if we're working on respect, we work on how we respect the horse, how the horse respects us. And then at the end of that, they go back and they sit down and they talk about how that correlates to recovery and how the things that we did with the respect and the horse, plays into their everyday lives.
So there's a ton of parallels that you can play off of with the therapy. It's not just riding a horse. It's
Yeah,
very,
absolutely.
very, very involved. That's cool. Maybe a downer question, but you talked about the safety of the horses and the riders. Have you
Mm-hmm.
ever, in 11 years, had a injury?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, our horses are very well trained and they have to go through, to make sure we have certain, again, being part of PATH, we have certain requirements that we have to accept a horse into our program. And then on top of that, we have different things, a trial period, different desensitizing, working with them to make sure they're a good fit. And although, you might have the most what people call bomb proof horse, they're still animals, things can happen, but it's not very common. In my 11 years, I personally think I've had maybe 3 injuries that I can remember off the top of my head, major, but all was well and they still came back and got on the horse. So, it's just like anything, they can be unpredictable at times, but ours are very, very well trained that it's not it's not a common thing to have people injured. But we also have safety procedures put in place through PATH that we make sure are done, such as emergency dismounts, things like that, that help protect the volunteers, the riders, and the horses. Because not only could you have something go on with the horses, but something could happen with the students that you need to immediately bring them off the horse. You really have to look at all the variables when going into a therapeutic riding lesson. Horses can be unpredictable. People can be unpredictable.
Well, definitely the people. So can you can kind of sniff it out before it happens, like with your intuition and the horses and just assessing the situation.
Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Horses, you can see when they are a little bit, I guess you would consider on edge. But if you have ever been around horses, you do know that sometimes they spook out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So those are type of instances that you just have to then go into okay, what are my emergency procedures? Let's make sure that everyone's safe, staying in a safe area. Let's assess the situation and move on from there.
Yeah. Well, just some quick math. If you see 100 horses, did I say a week? You said a week, 100 or 100 riders a week.
100.
So that's 400 a month times 12, 48. I mean, that's over 52,000 participants that you've seen in 11 years and only 3 injuries. That's pretty good.
Okay, now don't quote me on the 3. That's the that's what I
But
that's what
nothing,
I can immediately.
nothing major like getting stomped on or anything.
No, yeah, no.
Wow. Okay. So it's obviously there's a lot of parameters that go around it. So anybody who's listening to this a little bit on the fence on kind of the safety precautions can rest assured because everybody is very safety
Well,
oriented.
absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that we encourage, if anyone looks into it, to look for a PATH accredited center or instructors that are CTRI, which is through PATH, because it's not just a pony ride. There are safety measures, it's not just come out here to my barn, let's throw you on a horse. There's a lot that goes into knowing the safety and how to implement it all properly to make sure, things go as smoothly as they can.
Yeah, yeah. How would you say that equine therapy, like, what's the biggest benefit for individuals with disabilities?
My goodness. Well, you really got to look at the different disabilities. I guess I can go through like someone with physical disability. Well, for anybody, riding a horse in general is going to strengthen their core. It's going to help with their balance and coordination while they're riding. It's going to open up their hips. It's going to give them that motion of a walking gait. So while they're riding, that's what it's assisting. Within our lessons, when a student comes in, they actually begin by grooming the horse. So that means they're brushing the horse. And we always ask, they do both sides of the horse, which they also have to switch between their right and their left hand. So what that's doing is warming up those muscles right and left as they're moving, as they're doing circles with their brush, as they're, brushing their horse. Then on top of it, it's working both sides of their brain, their right and their left side of the brain while they're doing this. After that, they then have to tack up their horse, which means put the saddle pad on, the saddle, the bridle or side pull, the reins. So what that's doing is working their muscles because they're putting it on the horse. It has different ties, buckles, snaps that they're going to be using their hands for. Maybe at home, this participant struggles with just putting, enclosing their belt. Well, okay,
Motor
do
skill.
that. Do what?
Oh, some fine motor skills.
Absolutely. So then they're going to work on doing those buckles with that girth, and that's going to translate to at home when they have their belt buckle that they have to enclose. And then on top of that, it's instilling responsibility. It's instilling confidence, independence. Yes, we get to go enjoy riding, but we got to take care of this animal first. And you have to help, you have to put the tack on the horse. You have to keep your horse clean. They're doing us a favor. We're riding our horses, enjoying our time. We have to make sure they're healthy and happy too. And then, of course, when they're riding, like I said, it's strengthening that core. It's helping with balance, coordination. One of my students that I've had since I started in 2014, she has rode for 25 years. She has cerebral palsy and she is wheelchair bound,
Yeah.
but she knows riding, like it's the back of her hand. So one thing that you notice with her is that when she gets on the horse, she does, her muscles are very tight. She's kind of, kind of in a more awkward position. But as she gets to moving, her legs relax, her legs get lower, her body gets more relaxed. What it's doing is she rides bareback. So that heat between the horse and her legs is actually helping relax those muscles.
Wow.
With her not being able to walk, she doesn't have the ability to work those muscles that me and you might take for granted when we're walking on a daily basis. But with the horses, we use a quarter horse based type of horse. Their walking gait is similar to a human's walking gait. So while she's riding, she's actually working those muscles that me and you would be working when we're just walking down the street.
No
And so,
way.
she doesn't that in a chair, but when she's on the horse, she absolutely gets to. It's helping her physically. It's instilling confidence because here she is. She gets to be on top of a 1,000-pound animal and walk wherever she wants. So that would be a lot of your physical. Again, we already talked about a lot of the verbal. We want to try to instill verbal cues, talking to the horse, walk, whoa, responding back to our instructor if asked or our volunteer, things like that. It's instilling responsibility, confidence, those fine motor skills, like you mentioned. Let's see, what else is there? What else am I missing?
Well, I would think like emotional too. Just the fact that you're creating independence, which creates autonomy
Absolutely.
in the individuals. And just that sense of ownership and be able to do stuff on their own is probably everything.
Now, I do remember one time my student with cerebral palsy that I just talked about. I remember her, I can't quote her word for word because this was years ago, but she made the comment to me, you know, she loves her life, but she's always in a chair and talking up to people, which, but when she gets on that horse, she's up there, she gets to move around and she can actually, she per se looks down on people, not in a rude way, but it's that confidence boost of, I can do this, I don't have limitations up here. Let me be free
Yeah,
type of thing.
I'm sold. I'm sold. If you don't have your child in horse therapy, you got it. I had no idea it was so involved. I guess I didn't really think about it. Like, I just know
Well,
being around horses somewhat, and then my niece went through some pretty traumatic events in her life, and she has 3 horses, but I know it's been just a game changer for her and just dealing with some of that grief. And so,
mhm.
but all like the physical, everything, and the fact that your student can go places, who's wheelchair bound. Like, that's incredible. Do you ever have competitions?
We do not. We will try to do horse shows
Okay.
with our students. And what that is that's an opportunity for all of our students to come, and we schedule for them to have extra family, friends, kind of come out and see what accomplishments that they have done over the years, or how, what all they're doing. Because as a CTRI, which is the certified therapeutic riding instructor, I am teaching these students a riding skill. So my goal is to teach them a proper, how to properly make your horse walk, how to stop, how to back, how to turn. But in the end, it's benefiting them therapeutically is pretty much what it is.
Yeah. Wow. So what does a typical session look like?
For our barn, which it is different, at different path centers where you go and things like that. But for us, it's a 45-minute session. The student comes in, they groom their horses, tack up their horses, and then we ride. And each lesson, we have a specific riding skill that we're working on. Each instructor gives each student a 10-week goal. So that riding skill of that specific lesson is going to then help them reach that goal. It's okay if that lesson we don't complete the writing skill, as long as that's what we're working towards.
Yeah.
So our writing skills and lesson plans for each individual is going to be different. So it's going to be tailored to what that individual is working on. But like I said, so my writing skill for a nonverbal student might be, we are going to walk, halt, which is walk and stop our horses 3 times along the rail. So what that's going to do is we're going to encourage our student to pull back on the reins and to say the word walk. So we're working on that writing skill, but it's working on their core, it's working on their balance, it's working on that verbal cue of walk and whoa. And then after we complete our lesson, or we will then go back up, our students dismount, and then they do have to take off their tack, put it away, and then they groom the horses a little bit more. So again, that's instilling that responsibility. We got to enjoy our time riding our horses. So now we have to take all this stuff up and we have to go put it away.
Just, yeah, responsibility, taking care of your stuff, taking care of the horse. And I'm sure, do they stick with the same horse typically?
It just depends. Students, most of them, our goal is to improve their writing skill. So I do have, different horses that are, have different, are good for different writing skills. So I have my one good old trusty horse that I'm going to put any beginner on,
Yeah.
that doesn't move as fast as this horse over here to walk. So, we're going to start there. And then as that student progresses, we might move up to a horse that's just a little bit more challenging. That student has to work a little bit harder to communicate to that horse. So yeah, students definitely move around. That's the goal, is a good equestrian is going to be able to ride all of our horses, because each horse rides differently too. So
Do they form a pretty deep bond with the horses?
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Especially
How does that go
in
when you
their
switch it up?
most of my students, if they plan to switch their horses, we definitely give parents and caregivers an idea, or let them know who we're switching to, so that at home they can prep,
Yeah.
let them know, hey, you're going to be switching, so that when they come in, because a lot of these individuals, if we switch it up last minute, it's not gonna be fun.
It's not gonna go
So we
well.
have to let them know. It's definitely been hard because, of course, being there 11 years, a lot of our horses are what we consider senior horses. So I've seen horses, that have gone on to greener pastures, and so that's definitely hard with some of these students that have rode these horses for 5 to 10 years, and then for the better health of the horse, they've had to go on to greener pastures, and they're no longer with us. So
Yeah.
that's hard to watch. Some students, they definitely take that pretty hard,
But
which
again,
we all
that's
do.
another life skill that you're teaching. Like, not
Yes,
everything's always the same. Things happen, people move on. Wow.
absolutely.
How about, what's your role with the caregivers and the families? What's their vibe?
Well, when a participant first comes into the program, We definitely talk to the caregivers and the parents, what are your goals? What are you wanting to see out of this? What are some things at home that works for you? What are some things that at home do not work? So we know what maybe we need to do or don't do. But we definitely work with them on those long-term goals, those life skills. What are they working on at home? What are they working on in their other therapies that we can then provide and assist with? So always communicating with the caregivers, especially too, if maybe an individual's had a more rough day at home or at school, letting us know, hey, things weren't that great. Maybe do this to switch things up, just always communicating with the parents and the caregivers like, hey, this is what we're working on. How can we do better? Things like that.
Yeah, and I'm sure when they, oh yeah, so how is it when they accomplish their goal? Is it like super rewarding and the rider's super pumped? That's got to be an incredible moment.
Yes, it is very exciting. Honestly, I probably get more excited than some of these writers. They're like, yeah, I did it. And we're like, heck yes, you did it. This is a huge accomplishment. But yeah, it's definitely very exciting to see kind of those first and then to see them keep building on top of those, especially when you have a nonverbal student and you never thought you would hear the word walk or woe.
Yeah,
And we hear that few, it's so exciting. And then you go, months or years. It just depends how long it could take. And you get the U and the K, you get a wook, it is very exciting. So
yeah, wow. What are some misconceptions about equine therapy?
what I said earlier that
That it's just a pony
we're
ride?
just a pony ride and it's a backyard operation. It's more than just a pony ride. We're teaching riding skills, and we're doing it safely and if efficiently through path and through who we are. It's not something we just picked up and decided to do one day.
Yeah, do you know it's like an insurance funded deal or is this a out of pocket deal?
Well, different facilities can have it set up different way. For us personally, it is not insurance funded because again, as a CTRI, I am not a therapist. I am a writing instructor that's teaching a writing skill that is helping, and it's an extension of their therapies. So I cannot bill insurance. There is another portion of therapeutic writing called hippotherapy, which we do not offer at the moment, but we are currently looking for a therapist. And what that is where you have a therapist on staff. So I, as the writing instructor, would be working with the therapist. We both would be involved in the lesson, and your lesson might focus more around, instead of how I focus on a writing skill, the lesson might strictly focus on something physically strengthening via the therapist. So if I had a physical therapist, they might just be writing in circles, working on different exercises to strengthen their core. Versus when I'm putting a student on, I'm saying, okay, we're going to be working on walk, halt, transitions. And because we're doing that while writing, it is working your core. So it really just depends the facility and what exactly is being offered if you can use the insurance.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you think there's a some sort of spiritual connection, like just in a broad sense? I mean, even with you working so closely with 1,000 pound animal, you know,
Absolutely.
and then like how does because I've always been curious on the spiritual world with individuals with disabilities. I've had one particular situation which I wrote about in my book about a student going to a church and we were sitting in the front row and I just asked her like what do you see right now? And she's like, "Oh, the angels, they're flying everywhere." And I was like, "What? Say that again." She's like, "Oh yeah, they're all over the stage. They're flying everywhere." And then that got me thinking so much. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, who knows what kind of spiritual connection they can see that we can't?" And I mean, everyone's brain's wired differently, and theirs is wired differently. But I'm sure, seems like there could be something like that with the horses.
Well, I've always said horses are very healing. There's different aspects to it. One thing that comes to mind is I have one particular horse, which, like I said, horses can read emotion 10 times better. They know what you're feeling. Part of that is because horses in their herd dynamic, when they're in the field, they will sync up their heartbeats with each other. So that way, if this one's grazing over here and this one over here sees a predator, it kind of alerts the whole, they know what everyone's feeling. So you got to think about, if you come in to do something with this horse and your heart rate is up, you're nervous, they're going to be able to feel that. And a lot of my horses are going to say, mentally, they're going to say, all right, let's take a deep breath and calm down. So they're going to try to help kind of with almost, I almost want to use the word aura. They want to help calm you down. I have one horse specifically that works with one of my nonverbal students, and I've seen with my own eyes that my lesson at 4 o'clock is an independent rider. So it is a student that she rides by herself. She's very confident. She knows what she's doing. And this horse, she tests her a little bit more. She's not a bad horse. She doesn't do anything wrong. She just wants to push this other girl to her limits. She wants to make sure she knows what she's doing. Well, then her next student at 5 o'clock is a younger girl, nonverbal. And you almost see in this horse's eyes the flip. She will stand as still as she can. And I've watched this little girl groom before, and she gets a little bit too close. And I've watched the horse just kind of sit there, almost like she's holding her breath. And she's like, I'm not going to move, because if I move two steps, I'm going to step on her,
Wow.
So I've got to witness kind of watching this change in horses. But they're very healing in general. And I tell my substance abuse group a lot of times, maybe you have something that you need to share, you need to vocalize, but you're not ready to talk to anybody about it. Horses have ears for a reason. They've got these big old ears on top of their head, They would just say anything, So they're there for you to just really blurt out your problems to.
Yeah.
And help heal.
Man, I'm into it. I want to get a horse now. But that's where the healing is, and the therapy is with the horses. The deep feelers, and they can feel your emotions. And they can't talk back to you in conventional terms. So you can
They
can
can you're unhappy physically, that's for sure.
yeah. So you can really share your feelings. That's crazy. What advice would you give to someone interested in getting into this field? Or even if there's parents listening that are kind of on the fence on horse therapy, what advice would you give them?
If anyone wants to get into this field as an instructor, I would definitely recommend going to the PATH website, which again, that's the PATH, and it's pathinternational.org, I believe.
Okay.
I can send you, if you want to link it in there. And you can look on there for local PATH accredited centers to then get in contact with to see, okay, what is my next step on how I become an instructor? And again, for parents, you can get on there as well and see what kind of centers might be locally in your area. Because again, it's important not just to find a backyard operation. You need to find somewhere and go through somewhere that has these training, these skills, these certifications to do all of this effectively and safely for your student and for the animals.
Yeah. I know in Southern California where I'm at, Del Mar Fairgrounds is, maybe you've heard of it. I don't know. There's a big race. There's races there all the time. I'm sure there's some pretty good programs there that I'll link in this. I'll look it up. How about the parents of your riders? How do you experience them? Are they stressed? They're stoked that they're there? Or what's that like?
Well, there's definitely a range of your different type of parents. You have the ones that their child has just started. So yes, they are a little anxious. They're wanting to watch, they're wanting to hover. And then you have the students that have been there for 10 plus years, and the parents just drop them off in the back and they sit in the car because they get to have 45 minutes of time to read, without the student. But we do encourage the parents, when they drop their student off, or their child off, we ask them, drop them off back here, hand them over to us. For that 45 minutes, we're going to work with them because we don't want them focused on the parents. We want them focused on the horse, on the instructor. We want them focused on what we're working on. And then after the lesson, we will take them, back to the parent. And that's one of the reasons we can plan these horse shows. And we can also plan certain times for the parents to watch what they're working on and what their riding skill is that they're working on, because we don't expect the parents to just not be able to see what they're doing.
Right.
We do have an outdoor arena, so we have bleachers. If parents are wanting to watch, they can watch from afar. We just ask, don't be up in the lesson with the student. This is their time to learn. This is what we're working on. And it's best for you to just watch from afar or whenever we schedule time.
Yeah. You don't want the helicopter parent over and over.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great.
Well, because you think of the lesson too. A lot of my lessons, I have two students. And if I have a student that is wheelchair bound, I'm going to have two sidewalkers and I'm going to have one horse leader because those two sidewalkers are actually going to be walking with the student, kind of assisting them to stay on the horse to make sure their balance is good for a little bit. So you got to think if I have two students and then I have three sidewalkers each, that's 8 people and then 2 horses that I'm watching over anyways to make sure that everything is going safely and smooth. So no, I don't need an extra body to be watching.
How many horses at New Beginnings?
We have 10 horses total. 8 of those are our horses and then our big horses, and then we have 2 miniature horses.
Okay. What other animals are there?
We have a cat, but other than that, that is the only.
Yeah. What advice would you have for parents? This podcast is a space for parents to share their journey and their story with their special needs child. And then also I like having guests on to share information on different therapies, such as horse therapy. But just from your interactions with parents and students, what advice would you have for those parents just going through this journey of the special needs world?
I would say communication in all aspects.
Mhm.
So if you're working directly with me and your child and the horse, communicate to me the issues you've had at home, what you're working on. Today was a great day and this really worked. Share that with me so that I know, I only get 45 minutes with the student per week. So share with me more about that student. Share with me what's good, what's not worked with you. Um, and not just with, I would say in any other kind of therapies that you're putting your child through. Communicate that with whoever they're working with. And then I know at a place like us, we have 40 different riders. So we have an abundance of parents with different disabilities. Some are the same. Some are the same disabilities, but the students are completely different. So make those friends and communicate with those parents. Maybe this is you've just been going through this for a year. Well, then I have a parent over here that they're a veteran at it. They've done it there for 25 years. Maybe they have advice that could help you. So I would just say communicate in all aspects.
Yeah, that's huge. Communicate in that community, just being around. That's another perk that parents are going to meet other parents going through the same journey. So horse therapy is where it's at. I don't see a downside, really.
And now I really do.
I'm just blown away at how in tune they are with people and how they can feel emotions. That's crazy. I would wonder,
Yeah.
now it makes me curious too. I would wonder what if I went and hung out with some horses and there was I wonder what they would do with me.
You never know.
What kind of
I mean,
vibe?
all horses are.
Yeah, or what kind of vibe do I put off that would make them act a different way?
Yeah, you would be surprised.
Yeah. Oh, so cool. Well, I'm so excited that we had this conversation and learning about all the perks and benefits of horse therapy. Do you have any closing thoughts?
No, not at the top of my head.
Yeah. So you said this morning you went in and fed some horses. What's the rest of your day look like?
Probably not much till tomorrow.
Yeah.
We have our lessons on Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays.
Okay.
It's kind of a pickup day of doing any kind of paperwork, lesson plans, anything like that needs to be done. Because right now we are only 3 part-time paid staff with 4 instructors on board. So all of our instructors and our staff have other jobs. So going into this field, we absolutely love it. It's my dream, but it's not the get rich scheme. You do it because you love it. You do it because you make a difference. Is why you get into this field.
Well, we need more of that for sure. And I know all the families and students that you work with, I'm sure they're super blessed. So Thank you for what you're doing. I'm excited to get this podcast out there and open up some minds to all the benefits of horses. And yeah, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, cool. Well, we'll be in touch, and I'll make sure I'm going to go find a horse and hang out with it. I'll make sure to tell you about it. You know, I have a buddy that has 2 horses. I'm going over there.
Might let him know first.
Yeah, I'm gonna take everything I just learned and see what happens.
No, dear.
I hope I don't send a picture of me in the hospital. No, I won't.
I am not responsible for anything that happens.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, you have a wonderful day, and we'll be in touch.
And thank you very much.